The words encouragement and discouragement are very similar, but they are worlds apart. When someone is encouraged, they're optimistic, they're hopeful, confident. But when somebody is discouraged, they're pessimistic, negative, gloomy, cynical. Discouragement can make you feel like giving up, and probably all of us have been there. Well, what do you do when you're in a slump and you feel like giving up? Well, here's something from baseball, which we're just starting that season of baseball once again. But one famous baseball player said this: winners, pros, never give up in a slump. They just keep on riding it out. They ride out a slump. They just keep on going. Well, that's pretty good advice, but sometimes a slump can go on for an awful long time. And everybody has their off days, but maybe you've had an off month, or maybe an off year, or perhaps you feel like you're having an off life, and you ask yourself, is it worth to just keep riding it out? Well, I think the Bible has some very specific answers about the causes and cures for discouragement. They're found in the Old Testament book of Nehemiah. We'll get to that in a moment, but first of all, let me say hi and welcome again to another Heart to Heart Talk. These little devotionals from my heart to your heart. I hope they're a blessing. I'm Pastor John Kuert, the pastor at Alpha Assembly in Clarion, Pennsylvania. And thanks for joining me once again. We'll say more about the church and invite you to it in just a moment, but let's get back. Okay, now Nehemiah was commissioned to go back and build the walls of Jerusalem. He came out of captivity and he took numbers of people, thousands, literally thousands of people with him to help to rebuild the walls. But after a while, it got very draining. They got about halfway up and they were just so tired doing, making the block and fixing things and building up that wall. And it says the strength of the laborers was giving out. And that's one of the number one causes of discouragement: fatigue. You just wear out. And those people back then had worked so long and they were physically exhausted. And they worked with all their heart, but they were tired, they were weary. Another cause of discouragement is there was so much rubble around them. Nehemiah was talking about literal debris and trash. And have you ever noticed, if you're ever in a building project, a lot of rubble and trash seem to multiply? Well, that caused those people back then frustration. And sometimes in our lives, there's a lot of junk that kind of just surrounds us, and rubble and trash, and it just causes us frustration. Well, sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes there is a sense of failure. We feel like we're never going to make it. We're never going to have this sense of accomplishment like the people back then, when they were just fearful that the wall was never going to be finished. They thought it would happen very quickly. But now it looked like failure. There was opposition from some of the inhabitants in the area. And so they lost heart. They lost their enthusiasm. They got discouraged. And that's a big problem that causes us to want to just give up and be discouraged. And then finally, it's fear. The fourth cause of discouragement is fear. And the background of this story is there were some enemies who didn't want the wall built. And they were doing everything they could to keep the wall from being built. First, they ridiculed the Jews, then they criticized the Jews, and then they threatened them. We're going to kill you. And so they were fearful. And if you're discouraged, it's inevitably one of those four: fear, frustration, failure, or fatigue. So just stop and do a little checklist. Well, here's what to do. This is what Nehemiah told them. He said, everybody take a rest. And that's what they did. And a lot of times, if you're fatigued and you're discouraged because your strength is gone, and you're just tired of it all, you need to get away and rest. Rest your body. That's the first thing. Very quickly, you need to reorganize your life. When Nehemiah saw the people got discouraged, he said, therefore, I stationed some people behind the lowest parts of the wall at the exposed place, and he posted some others in different places, and he organized. Well, that's a good thing to do when you're feeling discouraged, is just to sit down and reevaluate and reorganize your life. And then, thirdly, remember the Lord. You know, it says there in Nehemiah, after I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles and the officials and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. So that's what you want to do for sure if you're discouraged and you feel like you've lost hope and you just feel like a failure and just nothing's going right. Remember the Lord. He is the great and awesome one that can help. And then finally, resist discouragement. Just say, I am not going to have a part of this. Nehemiah said to the people that back then, he said, don't be afraid of them. Remember, the Lord is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers and your sons and your daughters and your wives and your home. Don't give into discouragement without a fight. Just resist discouragement. Don't roll over and play dead. Resist the discouragement. And I think those things can really help us in our times of discouragement. D.L. Moody, a famous evangelist back in the 19th century, he once said, I've never known God to use a discouraged person. You don't determine a man's greatness by his talent or wealth or income or education. You determine his greatness by what it takes to discourage him. Now listen, folks, don't be discouraged. And definitely don't give up, because so many times, just when you're ready to give up, you know, God has a round the corner answer to all your problems. So anyway, I hope that helps you today. If you're discouraged, or sometime in the future, if you ever feel discouraged, don't let it overtake you. And maybe it's a good thing at a point like that to just read through the Old Testament book of Nehemiah. It can really help. Well, thanks for joining me once again. And I'd like to invite you to check out our Facebook page or our web, alphaag.org. You can check out all of my heart-to-heart talks there and other things that are going on in the church. And Lord willing, we'll see you one of these days at Alpha. That'd be great. We'd love to have you. God bless. Have a great day. We'll see you again soon. Bye.